Good morning, everybody. My name is Margaret Hinkle. I chair the Post Commission. Welcome to our meeting. Let me begin, please, with a roll call of the commissioners. Commissioner Baker,
Good morning, President.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Good morning, I'm here.
Commissioner Calderon,
Good morning, everyone. I'm here as well.
Commissioner Crispin,
Good morning, I am here.
Commissioner Hall,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Luma,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Talley.
Morning, present.
And we have all commissioners present. We obviously have a forum. Let me ask next, please, for a motion to approve the minutes of our May 15th meeting. Is there a motion? Such a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Mr. Calderon,
Yes.
Mr. Crispin.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Crispin, I don't believe you were in attendance, correct?
I'm
Yes.
trying to remember. Was I not?
No, you were not present.
Okay.
Excuse me, I think not. Thank you.
Disregard my yes.
Commissioner Hall, please.
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
and Commissioner Talley.
Yes.
I also approve. They're unanimously approved. Let me move on then now to our Executive Director report. Enrique, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, commissioners. Let me share my screen like I normally do to give you my Executive Director report. Can everybody see the screen in the PowerPoint? Thank you. Commissioners, we have a full agenda today, especially in executive session. I will be brief with my remarks about the activities in the last month. I will begin my report with a certification update and discuss the most recent numbers of certification applications submitted to date in anticipation of the June 30th deadline that is fast approaching. I will also summarize some of the recent activities around stakeholder engagement, instances where we are invited to present and engage with other interested parties. And I will follow up with a brief finance and administrative update. Our CFAO, Eric Revelo-Pradas, who is here for questions, will be back next month to provide an end of fiscal year update as we close our fiscal year coming up on June 30th. This chart presents preliminary figures regarding the certification wave of incumbent officers with last names A through H. Their certification is set to expire, as I mentioned earlier, the end of this month. The certification team continues to receive and process those certifications. They're busy answering questions and processing the streamlined process that we've implemented in the last few months. We estimate that just north of 7,700 officers will be seeking recertification this time around, and more than 5,000 have already submitted those certification applications. That represents just about 2/3 of the people that we are expecting. The team is already processing those applications as they come in. And as in previous years, a very small number of those applications will have some kind of exception or additional consideration as represented in this chart. So far, we have 66 conditionally certified individuals and 21 more who require further review. At this point, these figures are changing every day, and I will be back to report at subsequent meetings what those final numbers are for this batch of recertification of officers. I should note that one police department has asked that and has been granted an extension like the regulations provide for, It is possible that some of the other departments that still need to submit information might end up asking for an extension, and nobody will lose their certification if they are granted such an extension. I also want to highlight two certification categories that we will begin reporting on as part of this wave of certification. This June 30th will mark the first time that a certification initially granted by post, not by statute, will expire, and in some few cases, such a certification may not be renewed because of the officers leaving, essentially. I'm talking about officers who may have left the profession already, maybe they are leaving soon, or and they're leaving in good standing. In other words, not as part of a disciplinary matter. They're no longer looking to be seeking to be certified, and they have not asked for a voluntary relinquishment. So our intention is to mark those officers' certification as expired. Our plan is to simply continue reporting on these individuals with a certification expired for a period of time. That period of time really has not been determined, but it doesn't have to be indefinite. But we will keep that status in our records indefinitely. Someone with an expired certification might decide to come back to the profession, do details, what have you, and they will have to reapply for such a certification. In some instances, the requirements of such application will also depend on the amount of time that such a break in service takes place. For context, the MPTC has certain requirements for officers with a break in service between 0 and 3 years, and between 3 and 5 years, or over 5 years. There's different requirements on such. We will follow those regulations, or we will have officers follow those regulations if they were to come back from an expired certification. The second category of certification that we will implement and begin reporting on is one that we will call restricted. This category will apply to an officer who, during the period of their certification, may leave a department, perhaps due to a disciplinary matter. Those instances will include a termination, or a separation agreement, or a resignation in lieu of discipline. Again, these are small numbers compared to everybody that we certify, but those are important categories that we need to track, and we do track closely. Our plan is to mark the certification of an officer in this category as restricted as soon as post receives a report. I want to clarify that for those few instances, an officer being terminated or resigning in lieu of discipline, we have and continue to implement a process to identify those officers internally. But the extra step that we are taking now is marking their certification as restricted, and reporting those publicly. This we believe, will minimize the possibility that a prospective hiring department who perhaps fails to investigate the circumstances around the departure of an officer from a prior agency without checking with post, that doesn't happen if they are checking our website at a minimum. We will also talk about updating our reports like we normally do, perhaps more often than monthly, for instances like this. So the good news is that there's an existing regulation that applies here, that is 555 CMR 912, subsection 7, that reads that in order to be a certified officer, an individual needs to be both employed by an agency and have the post certification. And if there's otherwise, it will be restricted. I'll move on to a recent number of instances where we have, some of us have recently presented in front of meetings or other stakeholders. This is an ongoing effort to engage with groups that want to hear from us and communicate both our activities and what updates we are working on. Back in May, our Director of Standards, Matt Landry, presented in 2 separate occasions. One was the Martha's Vineyard Law Enforcement Council Conference, which is attended by a lot of chiefs from the Cape, South, and Central regions of the state. Matt also presented in front of the Joint Labor Management Committee, and most recently in front of the Mass Municipal Association Policy Group, which is again a group that tracks us closely, as there's a number of things and activities that group do fall under town administrators, mayors, etc. A few of us attended the recent conference of IADList, which brings directors of post directors and other staff from around the country and other countries as well. This is truly an international conference. This is the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Trainings Agencies. And we have been members of this association since our inception. This is the association that publishes and manages the National Decertification Index, among other things. This conference is a great opportunity to share ideas and understand what other states are dealing with. This typically proves to be invaluable, and we will be reporting more on this to the rest of the staff, etc. This conference also, one of the outcomes was that there's a Northeast region that we are part of that is also very interested in having a separate meeting perhaps around the spring, for the region, and I expect to bring additional staff to this type of gathering. I also recently met with the Mass Chiefs and Major City Chiefs Executive Board joint meeting, who I know appreciate updates and upcoming topics that the Commission is or will be considering. A few of us recently met with Chair John Mahoney and his staff at the House Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight, who also wanted a briefing on the recent trajectory and evolution of our agency since inception, but we're also very interested in the topic of constables. Finally, we have had a number of interactions in the recent past with the Mass Sheriffs Association, and we have a meeting with them both this afternoon and tomorrow to discuss, among other things, the definition of police duties and functions and how their activities can be counted with the MPTC for those 2,400 hours for those that went to the Breach Academy. So a number of things and engagement with important stakeholders, and I think they're all very useful. I will move on to a brief administrative and finance update for fiscal year 26. We are now in the process of the conference committee phase of the budget development process. That committee in the legislature was in place on May 29th. But since our appropriation is technically not in conference, we can be assured that our budget of 8.992 million will come out of that process as expected. The governors, we will still track any kind of report from the conference or governor vetoes, etc. But we are, in case they pertain anything to post, but we are moving ahead with the spending plans for this year because there are very little chances that our budget will move in any significant way. Now, when it comes to fiscal year 25, we are, as I mentioned earlier, fast approaching the end of the fiscal year. That's this coming Monday. We have revised our spending estimate a little bit downwards by approximately 150,000 from 8.28 million to 8.13. And the latest Treasury report is also included in the packet. Despite this revision, we're still holding to approximately 500,000 or 600,000 for total reversions back to the legislature in unspent monies. They could reach a little higher, but we are monitoring the final numbers, including not paying vendors if they have not delivered fully some of the work that we have done, and potentially also requesting a pack of $74,000 relative to additional security build up in the office and relative to our main entrance. We want to make sure that that work is completed before June 30th. Otherwise, we cannot make that payment if the work is not included. By year end, we will just have 2 positions short of the 53 employees that we targeted for the year. We continue to do some hiring, as I will detail in a minute. And we have recently updated the internal control plan, which will be published by June 3rd or the very first week of July. I'll mention 5 new additions in the form of interns to the commission. The Division of Police Standards has brought on 2 legal interns for the summer, Mahmoud Mustafa of the University of Minnesota Law School and Ashley Sebastian of the New England Law. The legal division has onboarded 2 legal interns as well, Manny Parker of the Northeastern University School of Law and Ektha Ravishankar, from Suffolk Law. We have a returning intern in Max Smith Stern. He returned to the IT division for a second summer, and we are all very happy that there are a number of several projects that have been on tap and they continue to do. We hope to learn and benefit from the work that they do just as much as they learn from the work of Post. There's a couple of recruitment efforts that continue in the form of a record access officer and a business analyst. These positions are expected to be filled in the first quarter of fiscal year 26. And as mentioned, we are currently at 51 in terms of headcount. Let me pause there, commissioners, and see if there are any questions or comments. I'll stop sharing. Commissioner. Seeing none, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Can we move on then to the finance and administrative update, Eric?
Actually, I took that, Madam Chair. That was part of my report. I've already done that that portion.
I'm sorry. Are there some treasurer's report items that you were going to screen share or additional ones in the packet?
I didn't plan on that. I'm happy to do so. We just included it in the packet like we normally do. It's the report for the fiscal year end on after June 30th will be addressed at the next commission meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks for everybody who has worked with you on the information that you provided to us here. I don't think I see any questions from any of my fellow commissioners. So then we would move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 4, Officer Behavioral Health. Enrique, would you like to introduce our speaker, please?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Commissioners, as you know, we continue to research and be educated really on the topic of officer behavioral health. The team continues to do research, including talking to a number of resources, both locally and around the country, practitioners who do this in the area of first responders, etc. We are very happy to have a guest speaker today. That is Dr. Tracie Goodness, who is a licensed psychologist who has done and continues to do a lot of work with first responders in Massachusetts. She has a presentation for us today, and let me turn it over to Dr. Goodness.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to everybody here for the time today to present to you. As I start to share my screen, here we go. I just want to make sure as well that everybody can hear me. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay.
We can see your presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So again, good morning, and thank you to the Post Commission for granting me time to speak with you all today. I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma in law enforcement officers and first responders, including different causes, what it actually looks like, and I'll briefly discuss prevention and treatment of trauma in order to help our officers and first responders optimize their physical and emotional health. Briefly, my name is Dr. Tracie Goodness. I am a licensed clinical psychologist here in the state of Massachusetts with areas of expertise in PTSD and veterans, active duty service members, and first responders, as well as civilians, and in health psychology, which focuses on the relationship between physical health and mental health. I did the majority of my clinical training here at the VA Boston Healthcare System in Jamaica Plain and in Brockton, as well as the home base, which is a Mass General Hospital and Red Sox organization that provides free care to all active duty service members, veterans, and their family members. That's who I am professionally. Personally, I'm the daughter of an Army veteran who worked as military police. I had a family on both my mom and dad's side who were all in armed forces, and I grew up hearing stories about military culture as well as military police experiences. Clearly, some of that rubbed off on me because here I am today with the majority of my clinical focus being working with veterans, officers, and first responders. To set the stage, it's important to note who our law enforcement officers are. Obviously, those in the virtual room today are familiar with this, but it does bear repeating for those who may see this presentation. They are resilient. Officers often face challenging and high-pressure situations, and their ability to bounce back and remain effective is crucial. This resilience is supported by training, experience, and a strong support network. They are dedicated to their roles and often go above and beyond to ensure the safety and well-being of their communities. This dedication is evident in their commitment to long hours and to the rigorous demands of the job. The ability to compartmentalize is essential for officers to manage the physical and psychological demands of their work. The skill allows them to separate their professional responsibilities from their personal lives, helping to maintain mental health and focus. Loyalty is a cornerstone of law enforcement culture. Officers are loyal to their colleagues, their departments, and to the communities that they serve. This loyalty fosters a strong sense of camaraderie and trust, which is vital for effective teamwork and collaboration. Officers are entrusted with the safety and security of the public, and they take this responsibility seriously. The sense of duty drives them to act with integrity and professionalism at all times. A genuine desire to help others is often what draws individuals to a career in law enforcement. Officers are motivated by a commitment to making a positive difference in the communities and improving the lives of those that they serve. And let's face it, the stress of the job is significant. It's more than a job, it's a calling. Many officers come from families with a history of law enforcement or military service. This background can instill a strong sense of duty and discipline, as well as a deeper understanding of the challenges and the rewards of the profession. And finally, that sometimes people often experience background trauma from their childhood, from adulthood, or even current or ongoing trauma. Officers are not somehow formed in a vacuum. We all bring our personal experiences to work in some form, and we do bring work home, even if we're incredibly effective at turning it off at the end of the day. First responders face 7 to 10 significant traumas in their first year, compared to civilians who may encounter only 2 in an entire lifetime. This results in a trauma rate exposure up to 5 times higher than that of the general population, concentrated within a single year. The burden psychologically and physically is high. Their workloads are demanding, with long, irregular hours, shift changes, understaffing, and increasingly limited resources, creating potentially high baseline stress. The high trauma exposure continues beyond that first year, obviously, which leads to repeated and cumulative stressors, which is a major predictor of developing PTSD. These stressors aren't constant, though. They occur randomly and sporadically. This then requires constant vigilance through times of high stress and through times of extended periods of repetitive, mundane, and at times boring tasks. Law enforcement boasts a unique culture where officers are often seen as superheroes, maintaining safety and order with a certain social power and allure. They're iconic in shows, movies, and even in everyday life. We all notice when an officer or somebody in uniform enters a public space or drives by. With this superhero status comes the responsibility to uphold that image while always being in the public eye. Officers must master the art of quick mindset shifts and compartmentalization, seamlessly transitioning between roles and from work to home. This skill is characteristic of the profession, as is the association with firearms, a unique aspect of the job. What other profession would we be surprised to learn that they weren't carrying a weapon? How do we define trauma in a clinical sense? According to the DSM-5 text revisions, a traumatic event involves exposure to or actual or threatened death, to serious injury, or sexual violence. This can occur through direct experience, through witnessing one of those experiences happening to others, or learning that a traumatic experience happened to someone that you're close to, as well as repeated exposure to distressing details, with one of the specific examples given in the DSM of first responders collecting human remains. Why does this matter? Trauma leads to measurable changes in the brain and in the body. It affects emotions, and it affects the way that you interact with others at work, at home, and in the community. Your brain is different, so you are different. It can cause structural brain changes like reduced hippocampal volume, which is the part of your brain that affects memory as well as emotion regulation. Does anybody here struggle with memory problems? It's actually the top complaint I often hear when I'm in my office. The amygdala is kind of our alarm system in the brain, and it helps process emotions and most specifically fear responses. So what we know is that trauma can increase amygdala activity, which then further heightens anxiety and emotional responses. Trauma can disrupt the balance of neurotransmitters in the brain, such as serotonin and dopamine, which play crucial roles in mood regulation and in emotional stability, contributing to depression and anxiety. Even further, at the very cellular level, trauma accelerates telomere erosion, affecting DNA replication and body repair. It also increases stress hormone release, it weakens the immune system, and it depletes stress tolerance hormones. As trauma reshapes your brain, you'll start to notice shifts in emotions, perceptions, and behaviors at work and home. Let's illustrate this with the example of Joe, a traffic officer. I will specifically note this is not a real client that I've worked with. It's basically a composite of multiple individuals who I've seen over my years in practice. So Joe's summer is off to a terrible start. Traffic stops are up, people's patience is down, and all frustrations are sky high. Joe's partner is out on medical leave, and he's working with a partner that, quite honestly, he doesn't really like or get along with very well. And he's covering extra shifts for others who are out on vacations that were planned well in advance before these staffing shortages. Recent tense interactions during traffic stops, including one with an illegal weapon, have left him on edge. Joe's sleep is disrupted by rotating shifts, and he struggles to unwind in time for bed. In order to be able to go to sleep, he resorts to alcohol for relaxation so he can get at least a few hours of sleep in. Despite getting that sleep, he sleeps lightly, he has bad dreams, and he wakes up kind of groggy and pretty irritable. In the morning, as he's making his coffee, his son comes into the kitchen and catches him off guard. Joe snaps at him, "What are you even doing up so early?" His son storms off, and then his wife comes in to see if Joe might be able to come to a family party this weekend. "Not now," he says, and leaves without another word. He knows he's going to have to deal with all of this later, but frankly, they just don't understand how stressful it all is. At work, his partner keeps talking at him during his shift, and he just drones on, but Joe doesn't hear a word that he says. Joe is so antsy and he's so wired, and he's wishing that his partner would just stop talking or that somebody would speed by so there's something to do. But he's also too bored to focus at the same time. This is just one example of a day in Joe's life, illustrating how trauma impacts effectiveness. How effective or present is Joe at home or work? This is what trauma can look like. As probably evidenced in the example of Joe alone, you can see how officers may be more susceptible to experiencing burnout, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, or having those clusters of symptoms all together, which is PTSD. I'll ask you to consider why somebody like Joe might turn to alcohol to cope with work stress. This example highlights a common link between trauma and substance use. While alcohol can enhance positive experiences, such as enjoying a beer by the pool in the summer, often in trauma, it's used as a means of coping, as a means of avoidance or numbing or escape. Imagine experiencing a traumatic event that triggers intense fear, anxiety, or anger. Your brain responds with a fight or flight reaction, which releases endorphins and it helps you cope. However, once those endorphins fade, you're left with raw, negative emotion. Flashbacks might occur where you feel like you're actually reliving the traumatic experience. And without that endorphin buffer, those feelings can be incredibly overwhelming. In an effort to avoid those distressing emotions, reaching for a drink can seem like a quick fix. It does provide instant but temporary relief. So as the effects of alcohol wear off, anxiety and fear often return, and it's almost like a rebound effect, stronger than before. And then it perpetuates the cycle. It's basically a game of emotional whack-a-mole. So if you push the emotions down here, they will pop up somewhere else, and the cycle continues. And the cycle of trauma is a repetitive pattern. Traumatic events alter brain activity and structure, leading to changes in mental health. This then can result in increased depression, anxiety, impaired cognitive functioning, and poor sleep, which further deteriorates mood. So it's a cycle that keeps feeding itself. When we try to cope the best that we can, sometimes that too can actually help feed that cycle if the coping mechanisms themselves are not helpful. This can look like things like excessive drinking, drug use, including THC and CBD, reckless spending, driving too fast, or doing other risky behaviors to feel something or to have a rush. All of these can exacerbate the cycle, again, then affecting mood and behavior further. Moreover, trauma also affects physical health, which is often more visible, right? It's measurable. It can show up in your annual PCP wellness visits and in your blood work. You can see the tangible outcomes. You can feel those effects. Whereas sometimes mental health is not visible in that same way. Some of the broader health risks of trauma include things like cardiovascular issues. So chronic stress, right, causes chronic elevated heart rate and blood pressure, which then increases the risk of things like heart disease, hypertension, or stroke. Immune system suppression. Prolonged stress weakens the immune system, which can heighten vulnerability to infections, and it slows recovery time, even from things like the common cold. Gastrointestinal problems. Stress disrupts digestion, causing a multitude of problems, including things like IBS, ulcers, or other stomach discomfort. And musculoskeletal pain. Persistent stress tends to lead to elevated muscle tension, which either can cause or worsen already existing pain, often in the neck, shoulders, and back. Understanding these patterns highlights the importance of addressing both the mental and the physical impacts of trauma. To visually summarize from the bottom up, right? Trauma is the base for all of the above changes, including the negative physical and emotional health impacts. The addition on the very top of the triangle, and the addition to this slide that hasn't been discussed previously, is death. This can be due to the physical problems that I elaborated on in the previous slide. It can also be due to death in the line of duty, though statistically health effects and health problems outweigh the rates of death on the job from violence. But also specifically not addressed previously yet is death by suicide. If any of you are watching this with colleagues, and if there are at least 4 of you there, I'd like you to consider that statistically, one among you may have contemplated suicide. This can range from thoughts of not wanting to wake up in the morning to hoping for a fatal incident on duty so that your family could benefit from the support they'd receive and they'd be relieved of the burden that you believe yourself to be. That's difficult to hear, and it's difficult to think about for yourself and for your colleagues. Discussing thoughts of death and suicide openly is crucial. I know that dark humor is common and coping, believe me, I get it. Yet being open and talking about suicidal ideation is important, and really calling attention to it beyond dark humor, as sometimes jokes contain a grain of truth. The weight of these thoughts can become overwhelming, even for officers who are often seen as superheroes, because the fact is, superheroes aren't real. We're all humans at the end of the day who can experience pain, hopelessness, and fear. Officers' unique culture, including carrying firearms, is something that also does pose a significant risk, as firearms are the most lethal means of suicide, offering no chance for reconsideration or for natural protective reflexes, as other methods of suicide may allow. For example, overdosing on pills, our body naturally and reflexively attempts to vomit for self-preservation. Suicide with firearm does not allow for that to happen. I will briefly draw your attention as well to the interpersonal model of suicide that can be used to help explain or kind of provide some context to suicidal ideation, which can often come from thwarted belongingness. Trauma often leads to feelings of feeling detached from others and to isolation. This can lead to thoughts of no one understands me, I'm alone. Perceived burdensomeness. Trauma diminishes self-worth and it impairs relationships at work and at home, leading to feelings of being a burden. I'm a failure. The world would be better off without me. And desensitization to violence. Exposure to violence and injury desensitizes individuals, making self-harm more conceivable. It lowers the threshold. And again, access to firearms provides immediate means. After diving into the tough realities for trauma in officers and first responders, here's the uplifting part: neuroplasticity. Our brains can adapt and they can improve, allowing us to effectively rewire our brains and reshape our thoughts, emotions, and our physical responses. How? There are many ways. Many of those are my specialty to assist with, but that detail will be saved for another time. For now, I really do want to focus on some of the very important first key steps that lie within all of you. Destigmatize trauma and mental health. True strength is asking for help. Let's redefine what it means to be strong. connect with mental health providers. We are here in the community, ready to support you. I told you all a bit about myself earlier. Hi, I'm a person and I'm also a provider. I live and I work in your community. Find someone who is the right fit for you. Open conversations, talk about mental health, talk about it casually, talk about it formally. Whether it's a simple, I need space, or checking in with a colleague, are you okay? Something seems off. Every conversation helps. I truly cannot emphasize enough the importance nor the effectiveness of peer support. It is helpful in improving mental health, and you don't always need an expert, especially just to get that ball rolling. Leverage your resilience. Officers are naturally resilient. Reflect on what boosts your resilience and build on it. And explore treatment options, from things like stress reduction at work to comprehensive wellness programs. There are many paths to healing. Peer support and destigmatizing mental health are crucial, but professional help is available when needed. Remember, mental and physical health are interconnected. Let's optimize both for a healthier, more resilient you. I have highlighted so many reasons why individual physical and mental health is vital. Now let's focus briefly on why this enhances officer wellness. Officer wellness is key to boosting community safety and trust. Healthy officers make better decisions, they manage stress effectively, and can de-escalate volatile situations more skillfully, leading to more positive public interactions. They're also less prone to burnout, which reduces absenteeism and ensures a steady police presence. This consistency builds trust and cooperation between law enforcement and the community, as citizens feel secure and supported by engaged officers. Put simply, prioritizing officer wellness benefits both the officers and the community, strengthening public safety and relations. Thank you for your time today, and I welcome any questions from the commissioners.
Well, I have a question. And I know trauma can vary based on the situation that they were involved in. But on the average, how long does it take? I mean, if they're seeking medical assistance, like talking to a therapist or a psychiatrist, does it take for someone, do they ever get over it, or at some point they just suppress it?
That is such a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking that. I think it touches on a lot of really important parts of trauma and what it is and what healing and moving forward from it looks like. That often, if somebody does experience one of those, again, criterion A stressors, and they start to develop a lot of those symptoms of PTSD, sometimes that can occur immediately. If it happens within a month, it's labeled as acute stress disorder. And if those symptoms persist for longer than that, that's when they get that label of PTSD. But to answer the question specifically about kind of recovering from that, recovery is absolutely possible. There are evidence-based treatments for PTSD that have been studied with so many different populations: cognitive processing therapy, prolonged exposure therapy, EMDR, and that treatment can be delivered in like 10 to 12 to 15 sessions weekly. So within 3 months, by engaging in this treatment, symptoms are reduced below clinical level. So people can go from meeting full criteria to not having those symptoms be present or interfering or distressing. And it is such an empowering thing to go through as a client and to witness as a provider. So people can absolutely process these events and move forward and live much healthier lives mentally and physically, right? So thank you so much for that question. I hope that answers the question as well.
It did. Thank you.
And let me, on behalf of Post, thank you, Dr. Goodness, for both the substance of your presentation and the manner of the presentation. We are very grateful, and I think I can speak for my fellow commissioners in saying that you have succeeded in educating us in a very meaningful way. And I think with that, let me turn to the next item on our agenda, which is mitigating risks associated with law enforcement. And to that, I turn to my fellow commissioner, Hanya Bluestone, please.
Okay, thank you. I will now also attempt to share my screen. Oops. Okay. Is that now visible
Yes.
to everybody? Okay. And if I do this, what happens? Okay, great. Well, first of all, I just have to say to Dr. Goodness that that is probably one of the best presentations on this topic that I have ever heard. That was really well done, and thank you so much for covering the topic so well. I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about some of the policy implications. And so for starters, my name is Hanya Bluestone, and for those of you who don't know, I am a clinical psychologist who trained in behavioral medicine and forensic psychology at the University of Massachusetts Medical School and at Bridgewater and Worcester State Hospitals. I also specialize in the treatment of PTSD, trauma, and addictive behavior problems, as well as forensic mental health and substance abuse evaluations. And I have worked with veterans and first responders throughout my career as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity today to share a bit of my clinical perspective with the Commission and the public. And I'd like to explain why I believe it's so critical for us to take meaningful steps to help ensure that all law enforcement officers in the Commonwealth have access to behavioral health resources and treatments. As Dr. Goodness has so eloquently explained to us, there is a growing and compelling body of research literature that now bolsters the argument that repetitive exposures to critical incidents and also alcohol or other types of substances can be associated with significant and measurable changes in the brain, especially if these influences occur over time. And that these changes in the brain are now becoming recognized as indicative of a chronic disease. We are also learning about the neuroplasticity of the brain and how certain interventions and treatments can prevent disease or restore brain functions by creating new neural pathways. In the behavioral health context, we call this prevention and recovery. So we have just heard about how law enforcement officers as a group are at increased risk for a number of negative health outcomes. We also know that law enforcement officers are an unusually resilient and dedicated group. When they enter this profession, they know that their jobs will be challenging, that they will face adversity, dangerous situations, and many thankless encounters with the public that they have sworn to protect and serve. But what they cannot possibly anticipate is the cumulative impact of law enforcement work itself on their emotional and physical health over time. So this chart offers an image of how I believe common elements of law enforcement work, namely stress, job stress, personal stress, repeated exposure to critical incidents, and the lack of consistent support, begin to overlap. And I think it's likely that there is a causal relationship with the negative health outcomes that we hear about, such as increased substance use, post-traumatic stress disorder, heart disease, and suicide. And so if we think about this, it's easy to see that these negative health outcomes can negatively impact each other and are interconnected. So for me, the bottom line is that the unique stressors of law enforcement work itself can be reasonably anticipated to affect the health outcomes of officers and indirectly their relationships and their interactions with families and the communities that they serve. And as Dr. Goodness tells us, and the research tells us, the good news is that we now know that these effects of job stress can be mitigated by these types of interventions, critical incident debriefings, taking time off, exercise, many of the things that are common sense that we all know to do in stressful situations. In the Commonwealth, we have made tremendous progress in providing these interventions and resources to our officers and their families. We also have an amazing, mostly volunteer statewide network of peers who are working in partnership with mental health professionals and sometimes chaplains to provide preventive interventions to officers and their families following exposure to critical incidents. They also provide information and referrals for officers who need additional support and treatment. But the problem that I think we still have is that there are agencies, departments, and individual officers who are underutilizing these resources due to lack of awareness, concerns about stigma, consequences, and breaches of confidentiality, and administrative obstacles to creating time to access these supports. Routine attendance at wellness visits, a model that has already been implemented by multiple states and is codified in the IACP Police Psychological Services section with guidelines for wellness visits, would provide a linkage for every officer in the Commonwealth to receive the resources that we have available and to be made aware of those resources. There are already police departments across the state that have contracted for their officers to attend annual wellness visits that are run by a peer and a licensed mental health professional. And the feedback from these departments has been overwhelmingly positive. Typically, officers are required to attend these visits, but their participation is voluntary. Nonetheless, given the good reputation of the peer support network, officers tend to choose to participate in these visits, and problems can be proactively addressed and identified before they raise concern in the workplace. The benefits of a peer professional partnership are significant for law enforcement officers, and we know from research on 12-step programs that peer support is a critical factor that can lead to better outcomes than traditional mental health treatment for certain problems, especially problems like alcohol abuse. So we know that it is important to provide law enforcement officers with the best possible equipment and training to prepare them and protect them in their roles. It's my opinion that we owe it to them and to the community that they serve to also do whatever we can through policy measures to make sure that they have the resources that they need to protect themselves from the now well-known emotional risks of this work. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to hear us on these clinical issues, and I'd welcome any questions.
Enrique, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I might have mentioned this at the beginning of Commissioner Bluestone's presentation, but she, of course, needed no introduction. But the presentation that she just went through was not distributed to commissioners in advance. I just want to state that for the record, was not included in the packet either to be fully in compliance with the open meeting law. But of course, now that you've seen these materials and these topics, asking questions or deliberating really about policy implications among you commissioners is entirely appropriate. And we're hoping that you do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Talley, please.
Oh, thank you. So if I heard correctly that sometimes these wellness visits can be mandatory, but officers can choose not to participate. So not to oversimplify, but does that mean they could be physically there, but whether or not they choose to engage in that particular session or series of classes, is that what's implied?
Yes, Commissioner Tai. What seems to be the recommended model is that it be that attendance be required. And when I say participation, what I mean is sharing personal information in the context of that visit. And so there is participation in the sense of listening to information that is provided by the professional, provided by the peer, having an opportunity to get to receive resources and information, but it is voluntary for the officer to decide whether they wish to talk with the mental health professional on a personal level.
So I'm trying to figure out how do we kind of still help that officer, because the officer in their mind can say, I choose not to engage because I don't think I need to be here. But it's obvious they need some help. So how do you help a person who decides I'm not going to tap into the help that's provided?
I think that's a question that we ask not just with law enforcement officers, but with people in general. And as I believe one of the slides kind of indicates, this model is based on the theory that when people have problems and problems start to become significant, that people will be motivated to try to do something to address that problem. This wellness visit is giving them an opportunity to access the resources that are available, and to get information from a peer who is someone that within the law enforcement community is recognized as a trustworthy individual, where there is a culture of some distrust towards mental health in general. So my belief is that over time, a model like this starts to decrease the stigma because everybody attends. And it's no longer a situation where you have to attend if there's something wrong with you. We know that the nature of law enforcement work itself causes these kinds of problems, and yet there's still stigma associated with receiving these interventions, doing critical incident debriefings, talking to a licensed professional or a peer. And this is probably one of the best models for helping people to feel more comfortable with that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Crispin, please.
Thank you for the presentations, incredibly insightful. While mental health professionals have substantially advanced and brought this issue of mental health wellness to the surface over the last few years, I think there is still some issues that we need to address. I think most police departments are not allowing police officers to go out on mental health wellness issues, right? We can all acknowledge that somebody breaks their arm, breaks their leg, and are no longer able to do the job. But they are police officers who suffer substantial mental health issues that put them in a place where they're probably not capable of doing the job. But most police departments are not really acknowledging the fact that, hey, this person may have gotten injured, much like if they broke their leg, their arm, or suffered some other physical injury, and are not allowing them to go out. How do we start to move this conversation along?
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think it's something that I hope that we as a commission will start to think about more systemically. But I believe personally that one way that we start to change that culture is by acknowledging that the nature of law enforcement work, especially with the level of stress and exposure to critical incidents that officers are experiencing, is not just an emotional problem, it's a medical problem. And that we can see now medical, neurological brain studies that show us the implications of repeated exposures to this type of incident. And we have to start changing the conversation because we now have the data and the research and the science to say that the work itself is contributing to this problem. It's not anything individual. It's not based on the individual officer and their level of resilience. It's a common, consistent problem where we see that over time, over the course of a law enforcement career, that the level of stress builds up significantly to the point where by about year 10, almost every officer meets the clinical criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. So we have to change this conversation by educating people is partly my opinion.
Thank you. Commissioner Calderon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First off, to both the doctor and my fellow Commissioner Hanya, thank you very much for talking about this at length. Couldn't be more true in everything that the both of you are saying. My comment really lies with how do we change departments moving forward? It starts with the change in the leadership of the entire departments across the Commonwealth. The departments themselves preach health and wellness. They preach family first, but that's not always the case. So I guess my comment, as harsh as it is how do we educate leadership within the departments, and how do we, excuse me, how do we mandate or figure out how the legislature may mandate departments to take more effective steps towards the mental health and wellness of the officers? It's one thing to preach it and have minimal access to organizations that are helpful to officers, but actions speak louder than words. And there are many departments around the Commonwealth that have very limited access to some of the institutions that Hanya, myself, and the other officers are familiar with, but there's not enough of them. And there's not enough of a push from the leadership in the department to make this accessible, not only to the officers, but to their families. My experience over 3 decades is, yes, police officers are suffering, and it reverts back to their family, as both you and the doctor have very nicely laid out for everyone. But families have no access to mental health treatment. Families have no access to someone within the department that they can call and really have a meaningful interaction. It just doesn't exist. And I guess this is the forum where I want to vent that out. It does not exist in the leadership of the departments, and it has to do better.
I know you're not asking, I mean, I know you're making more of a statement and you're not asking a specific question, really. I think this is kind of a question I hope we'll continue to contemplate. But my view, for what it's worth, is that we mandated it. That this is one of the roles of the commission where I believe we can make significant change in so many areas of law enforcement by providing access to these resources and by using the authority that we have as a commission to make this mandatory.
Thanks, Hanya. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Luma, please.
Yes, I guess I have a general question. It sounds like part of the conversation is that there needs to be a culture shift. And I'm wondering, in regards to the academies and the new recruits, how much emphasis is placed on well-being and mental health? Is it integrated fully into their training as they prepare for the careers in law enforcement? And I think that's part of the culture shift. If we integrate it at the beginning and set that expectation, then it just becomes normalized in some way. So I don't know if anybody can answer that question about how much emphasis is placed or how much training are the new recruits and academy members getting at the beginning in regards to mental health and wellness.
Well,
I can, sorry.
go ahead,
Yep.
Larry.
I assume she means somebody from law enforcement, so I'm willing to speak on that. We do get mental health training coming out of the academy now. But again, I want to strongly push that the rank and file police officers on the street, men and women, they accept this. They buy into it. They want the help. They want the annual screening. They want the ability of someone that they can call on a 24-hour basis when they or their family needs help. It's not being provided by the leaderships of the departments. That's really, when you say culture change, it's not the culture of the police officer, and I know you don't mean it that way. It's the culture of the leaderships of the department. There's just not enough access for police officers and or their families.
And I was just going to make the point that I think that there's a generational issue here as well, because younger generations are more savvy and more comfortable with mental health information and asking for those kinds of services. And I think that might also be one of the reasons why there's this sort of distance between the administration and the line of duty officers.
The other piece is, while we continue to preach this at the academy level, I don't think it's widespread across the department, right? I think the academy levels teach a lot of these young recruits to the ideal in terms of everything that exists in policing, but then they get out there, the culture is very different. It's the notion of being mentally strong does not necessarily allow them to go and seek out mental health services. I think the only times that a lot of departments will speak to the need for, therapy or anything that relates to mental wellness is if there's someone in the department who commits suicide, which unfortunately happens all too often. And I think at the end of the day, if we know the long-term impact of being exposed to these traumatic experiences, but because it's never been a thing in law enforcement, we're taught that we should be strong. Maybe some of the younger police officers buy into the notion of therapy or um, seeing a psychologist. But I think across the board, we as a profession have not fully embraced the notion of mental wellness, and the departments have not embraced it. But I know a number of officers across the state who have suffered substantial mental health issues. And when they have sought to retire on it, they've not been allowed. And the only time it becomes an issue is if they engage in some bad behavior on the job, and then all of a sudden everybody's judging them, not understanding that this is a longstanding issue that they sought out help for and it was not provided to them.
Thank you. I don't think I see any additional hands in the air. Commissioner Bluestone, I'm very grateful for your presentation. And as I think has been suggested, I think this is an item that we will need to periodically address. I think some very wise suggestions have been made in the dialogue that has occurred, and I think we can take that to heart. So I think unless there's anything else, and I don't think I see any hands in the air now, let me move on. Again, thanking you. Let me move on to the legal update and our general counsel, Randy Ravitz, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Hinkle. I will turn the floor over to Counsel Annie Lee.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chairs and Commissioners. Before turning to my presentation, I just want to provide a quick follow-up to the presentations from Dr. Goodness and Commissioner Bluestone, as well as the discussion that followed, which is that if any folks are listening and they're struggling with their mental health, resources are available. The National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available at 988, and the Massachusetts Behavioral Helpline is available at 833-773-2445. The Commission also has information about further resources on its website. The page is Victim Resources. It aims not only to help those who have been victims of crimes, but also those who have experienced traumatic events, including officers. And so with that, turning to the next item on your agenda, which, as Dr. Goodness said, is related, it concerns physical health. And so enclosed in your packet, starting at page 47, is a chart that will be the focus of my presentation today. This chart describes various options the Commission may consider when determining how to set ongoing physical fitness standards and evaluations for officers seeking recertification. The chart provides the six kinds of information, broadly speaking. The first describes initiatives that other states and agencies have undertaken to support officers' physical fitness. The second column sorts each initiative into one of three categories, those categories being informational, incentive or resource, and exam or evaluation. The third column provides examples from other states and agencies, and those agencies can be in the Commonwealth, but also outside the Commonwealth, of how those places have implemented a particular physical fitness initiative. The fourth column attempts to estimate the feasibility of implementing a given initiative. And so feasibility in this context means the ease of implementation. So where it says high feasibility, what that really means is a relative ease of implementation. And low feasibility corresponds to difficulties associated with implementation. The fifth column attempts to estimate how costly an initiative may be. And finally, the last column provides additional notes that may be helpful for the Commission to consider. And so with that, I will begin sharing my screen. All right, and so the first category of initiatives that's provided in your chart relates to informational initiatives. And so here we've identified three initiatives for your consideration. The first initiative relates to wearable health trackers. So these are things like Fitbits and Oura rings. And so we provide this example because this is something that some agencies, not a ton, have implemented. But this is just, a way for officers to sort of understand their physical movement, but also some sort of really basic medical markers, such as your heart rate, your kind of stress score, sleep score, if those are things that your tracker provides. The second relates to education concerning nutrition. And so we've saw in our research across the nation that there are some departments that are providing reimbursement for tuition for attending classes on nutrition. There's some agencies that provide free online webinars on nutrition. And then there's also one state or one agency, the Wisconsin Department of Justice, which provides its officers education on nutrition in the form of providing officers information about healthier food options at local restaurants. The third kind of informational initiative that is contained in your chart relates to wellness education. And so in this one example that we identified in Miami Beach, there's a wellness board that the agency makes available where information is regularly posted and updated in order to educate officers on any health issues, including nutrition, as well as information regarding health trends. And so the next category of initiatives relates to incentives and resources. And so you may have heard of some of this before, but here we have included 7 initiatives for the Commission's consideration. The first relates to on-site fitness opportunities. So as we found out through our survey of both agency chiefs as well as collective bargaining leadership, there are over 150 agencies in Massachusetts that currently provide some kind of on-site fitness opportunities for their officers. And so those opportunities can look like on-duty time to exercise. It can look like an on-premise gym. It can look like group fitness classes that are hosted by the agency, as well as one-on-one instruction with an agency-sponsored professional, whether that's a trainer or some sort of coach. And the next opportunity is off-site fitness opportunities. And this is something that more than 60 agencies in Massachusetts already offer. And so that can look like, as we heard through these surveys that we conducted, reimbursement or stipends to partially or fully cover the cost of membership at an offsite gym. In one example outside the Commonwealth in Avon, Colorado, we heard of an example where the agency provides its officers and family members unlimited free passes to the municipal recreation center that would otherwise require a daily fee. And so the third incentive or resource opportunity that we identified is fitness instructor training opportunities. This can look like the agency sponsoring courses to train officers to become certified to lead fitness classes such as CrossFit, with the hope that these officers not only pursue this instructions so they can help support their own physical health, but also so those officers who now have this instruction certification can sort of provide that to their colleagues at the agency. So perhaps that becomes through fitness classes. Another incentive or resource we heard about was sort of competitions. And so in Randolph, we understand that they conduct an annual fitness cup challenge, which encourages officers to, be more active, to sort of achieve certain metrics. And there's also a fundraising component to this. And so the next category of initiatives that relate to incentives and resources is one that we also heard about through our surveys. And those are simply incentives which can take the form of financial awards, which can look like one-time bonus payments or salary increases. They can be time off awards. They can be merchandise, ceremonial awards, such as a plaque, or decorative, such as a pin, for successfully meeting some sort of physical standard, and that's usually sort of the successful completion at a certain standard of a physical fitness exam. And so we heard that in the Commonwealth, there are already over 80 agencies that offer some kind of incentives. And so for those agencies that already do that, that would make sort of implementation feasibility high. So it'd be really easy for those agencies to continue what they're already doing. And it wouldn't be extra cost, or we think the relative cost would be fairly low because they're already sort of budgeting in that cost for offering these incentives. But that, however, does mean that for those agencies that already don't offer incentives, implementation may be low and the cost may be potentially high simply because it's not something they're doing, it's not something they've factored into their budgets. And also another aspect of this may be that it might require some sort of coordination with collective bargaining unions. And so that can be another added sort of complication or added sort of factor to consider there. Another incentive or resource that agencies have provided to support their officers' physical fitness, again, sort of ties back to nutrition. It's on-site healthy food options. So not only do some agencies help educate or provide opportunities for officers to learn about nutrition, but some agencies also provide healthy food options at the agency. And so that can be in the form of healthy food in the vending machine, but that can also be partnering with local companies to provide fresh, healthy meals that are available for purchase for officers at their agency. And the final incentive or resource initiative we wanted to bring to your attention concerns health and fitness personnel. So these are specific individuals who are hired by agencies to support officers' physical fitness. And so that can look like something like a wellness officer, which we saw in Plymouth, Minnesota, and they're focused on developing best practices and training officers in nutrition in order to support the overall well-being of employees. This can also look at something a little bit more targeted, such as a nutritionist whom officers can visit, or a physical therapist who can sort of treat officers for any injuries they may have. And we also saw in one sort of a little bit of an outlier case, but we thought it was worth mentioning to the commission, that in Butte County, California, that agency has also gone about hiring an acupuncturist to provide treatments to officers. And so the last category of initiatives for the commission to consider today relates to exams and evaluations, which is also something we've been talking a lot about in the past few months. And so these can be medical exams and evaluations. So these could be annual physicals or checkups with a physician. And that may be conducted by an officer's PCP or an agency-sponsored physician. We heard examples of both. We've also heard examples of agencies sponsoring medical risk assessments to screen for chronic or acute health conditions that aren't typically seen in younger individuals and therefore not typically covered by insurance and therefore not typically conducted. But these are actually conditions that officers are higher risk for because of the nature of the job that we heard from Commissioner Bluestone and her colleague. And so one discrete example of this is in Natick. In Natick, Chief Hicks, who is the chair of the MPTC, has implemented this Heart Healthy program for his officers. And so that attempts to screen them for the risk of cardiovascular events, which for officers, under a certain age wouldn't typically be covered by insurance. So this program essentially helps cover the cost of those otherwise out-of-pocket screenings. And so depending on how this looks, the feasibility here could be high, it could be low, the cost could be high, could be low, right? So if in Massachusetts, preventative care is covered by insurance, and in Massachusetts, everyone is required to have health insurance. And so a physical exam with your PCP would generally be fully covered by private health insurance, including the insurance provided by an officer's employer, their agency. And so that in that instance, implementation feasibility would likely be high and cost potentially low because you're taking advantage of a resource that you already have. But on the other end, such as the Heart Healthy program that I described, as I said, certain screenings aren't covered by insurance for everyone, such as EKGs for officers who are in their 20s, because presumably folks in their 20s are at lower risk of cardiovascular events. So screenings like that aren't typically covered, that would sort of result in implementation feasibility being potentially low and cost potentially high. So that's just want to explain that range of why we've said it could be low, it could be high. The second kind of exam or evaluation relates to medical clearance. And so we've seen this in other states that require physical fitness exams prior to an officer completing that or beginning that physical fitness exam. A lot of agencies require that those officers go to their physician and get a report that states that the officer is physically capable of participating in that physical fitness, such as in New Hampshire, prior to doing the Cooper test, they have to get a clearance by their doctor. But also in some cases, such as Maryland, they look for physicians to say that officers are physically capable of performing their job duties. And they also sort of rely on agencies or the officer's employing agency to sort of specify what those job duties are, particularly because the physical job requirements may change depending on the specific position of the job that the officer has, whether they're on patrol or if they're in command staff. The next exam or evaluation initiative is physical fitness tests. And so we traditionally talk about this as the Cooper test, but we also did identify in other jurisdictions where they offer other options in addition to the Cooper test, so such as a rowing test or a combat fitness evaluation. These are different ways of measuring someone's fitness. The next initiative relates to the functional capacity evaluation. And so this is something that we learned about from the Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission here in Massachusetts. It's called PARAC, or PARAC is the acronym. They have this return to service program. And so this return of service program is for public safety retirees who retired on disability, who are looking to actually return to work. And so PARAC requires those individuals prior to taking the PAT to perform this functional capacity evaluation, which measures different things such as, flexibility, range of motion, cardiovascular fitness, muscular strength. And the idea is that this is essentially like a pre-PAT. So if an officer or if a retiree does the functional capacity evaluation, but that evaluation identifies issues that lower the probability of passing the PAT, a doctor can recommend that the PAT be postponed so the officer can continue to sort of work on addressing those issues to make sure that they're better that they have a better shot of passing the PAT when they do ultimately take it. And that leads into the next exam or evaluation, which we've also heard about, which is the physical ability test. In the Commonwealth, it's required of all civil service candidates. It is technically by law required for all civil service officers every 4 years, but as previously discussed, this is a requirement that has not been enforced. And so the physical ability test here in Massachusetts consists of an obstacle course, separation event, and a dummy drag. And these are events that are meant to simulate actual physical tasks that officers may be asked to perform. And so the last exam or evaluation that some agencies and states have put in to evaluate their officers' physical fitness relate to body composition standards. And so these can be things such as waistline measurements, which Texas state troopers are required to meet, They can also look at things like BMI measurements, as well as percentage of body fat. I will note here that the state police in Texas, their officers union did file a challenge to the state's body composition standards, but that was ultimately unsuccessful. So it's currently enforced, but incredibly unpopular. Though there are some, in some cases, that may be because it's, those standards are mandatory, but there are other instances that we've identified, such as in Chelmsford, where those body composition standards are voluntary. And I'll note that a lot of these exams or evaluations, when they're voluntary, they're often tied to an incentive. So therefore, encouraging officers to try to meet these standards because there will be some benefit to the officer, whether that's time off or financial or some sort of recognition in their agency or by their licensing authority, such as a post. And so with that, I will take down this chart. And so the takeaways here really is that there's no one way to support and evaluate officers' ongoing physical fitness. This chart actually suggests that it may be most effective to consider a combination of initiatives and subject matters in order to holistically support officers' physical fitness. So for example, the commission could consider supporting officers' physical fitness through a combination of incentives and resources, in order to try to provide officers the means to meet exams and evaluation minimum standards. So for example, this could look like on-duty time to exercise, which hopefully means that officers have the opportunity to sort of raise their baseline level of fitness, which increases the likelihood that they'll achieve minimum performance levels of something like the Cooper test. You could also support officers' physical fitness through a combination of nutrition education and physical fitness incentives and resources. I think we hear all the time from doctors, it's diet and exercise. So really pairing those two things together. Another combination the commission could consider is combining sort of health and physiology education, which can help officers understand the results of a recent examination or evaluation. So for example, in this heart healthy example, if you have this EKG, which says you're okay, but you might be sort of displaying some sort of risk markers for a cardiovascular event, you may decide that, or your doctor may advise you that one way to lower your risk of a cardiovascular event is to get more exercise. So you start wearing a Fitbit or some sort of pedometer to make sure that you're sort of reaching your 10,000 steps a day. And I could go on, but really the possibilities of this are infinite. And so I think before we can propose anything for the commission to vote on, what would be most helpful at this stage is if the commission could provide some feedback as to which initiatives it think would be most beneficial for setting physical fitness standards and evaluations in accordance with the commission's statutory directive to establish a physical fitness standard that ensures officers are able to perform essential job duties. And also, it's good to know which seem most promising to the commission, but also which would be non-starters, right? Because we don't want to propose anything to the commission that the commission doesn't think would be even worth spending its time on. And so with that, turn it over to, the chair if there are any questions or discussion that I can help respond to.
Before I ask whether there are any questions, Attorney Lee, I do want to tell you how impressed I am. I know I speak for the fellow commissioners in terms of the research that you have engaged in providing the information that you just have given to us. It's really been an extraordinary range, I think, of other jurisdictions that you've looked at and provided us with the necessary buttressing, I think, of the points that you're trying to make. Are there any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners at this time? Otherwise, I think we'll address these issues in subsequent meetings.
Well,
Commissioner Talley, please.
yes, I just have a quick question. This may be inherent within what you explained. Every body type is different. So or is there a recommendation that based on your body type, these are the type exercises you need to engage in to stay fit to do the job?
So I haven't seen anything on that angle. I have seen sort of this trend or sort of this push to really provide for a range of sort of opportunities for physical fitness as well as examination, because people have their different preferences for how they exercise, and also some folks perform better on different events. So some folks may be better at strength, some may be better at sort of cardio events like that. So not quite to answer your question, but we have seen that there are a number of ways that agencies and states are attempting to sort of help meet officers where they are. And then there's another component that I think is helpful to sort of to keep in mind, is that there is really a push to sort of tailor kind of resources, but also crucially examinations and standards to the job duties. And that's something that we've heard through our conversations with both chiefs as well as sort of with CBUs as well, is that, you know, what officer A may be required to do because, you know, they're a member of SWAT is very different from what officer B, who is, you know, a chief and who, you know, spends a lot of time sort of in the office in the at a desk and may not be required to do sort of as many physical tasks as someone who's on a SWAT unit might be able to do. So that's, I hope that helps answer your question, Commissioner Talley.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much, Attorney Lee. And with that, Randy, do we move on to Attorney Shatford?
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. I will start sharing my screen. I believe it should be visible now. Yes, okay. So I'm here today to provide a brief overview of Juvenile Operations Standard, or release the draft Juvenile Operations Standard. And I will note at the outset that we are not looking for a vote on the draft standard yet, or a preliminary approval of the draft. We are merely seeking commissioners' comments and any feedback they may offer. As commissioners may recall, under Chapter 6E, Section 5B, the Commission is to develop certain minimum certification standards for agencies, and juvenile operations is one such standard. In developing the standard, Counsel Lee and I looked at a variety of sources, including but not limited to juvenile justice research, law enforcement agency documents, including memorandums of understanding, reform groups, federal laws, Massachusetts law, and public comments. And from those sources, we identified 14 principles that should be included in a draft standard. I will not go through all of them, but the materials will be in your packet, and I will cover some of the most important ones. So the key principle is officer compliance with their agency's code of conduct policy. And I will note that while the entirety of the code of conduct policy is important, the draft standard, in keeping with Chapter 6E's intent to professionalize policing and provide for bias-free policing, does emphasize acting professionally and ethically, treating others with dignity and respect, acting impartially, and avoiding the appearance of bias. Moving on to police custody and transportation, there are three elements: arrest, transportation, and temporary custody, that are grouped together, not only because there are various state and federal laws that are noted in the draft standard, but also because they all represent parts of the policing process where youths may not know the law particularly well, and when they may be especially vulnerable or scared. So to start with arrests, research data suggests that in 2024, youths were increasingly likely to be in physical custody compared to other years, and that there is an increase in the number of youths arrested for misdemeanor offenses, and that youths were arrested along, or at least there's a disparity among racial and ethnic lines in which youths were arrested. And in light of that, the draft standard recommends that officers treat custodial arrests as a last resort, and instead view issuing summons as a primary method for bringing children to court, and that agencies create comprehensive requirements for use of restraints on youths, and that officers are directed to protect youth's privacy, contact youth's caregivers, issue Miranda warnings, and provide appropriate medical responses. And in terms of transportation, before a youth is to be transported, the draft standard provides that officers are to attempt to contact a youth's caregiver to inform them of the location the youth will be transported to, and to take many things into consideration, including the officer's gender identity, the presence of non-officer adults, and the presence of youths of another gender identity. And if an officer is transporting a youth without another officer present, then they should use some sort of recording method. Moving on to temporary custody, the draft standard provides that officer or youth should be in an environment that is sight and sound, separate from non-officer adults, that is where the youth is likely to feel safe and/or is an appropriate detention facility, and that the youth should always be under constant direct supervision and surveillance by an appropriate police staffer, and that there should be access to a caregiver for the youth and medical assistance if necessary. The next element that I will address is school resource officers, and as provided by state law, as provided in state law, the draft standard also provides that the agencies and any schools should have a memorandum of understanding about school resource officers and should cover operating procedures that deal with daily operations, policies, and procedures for school resource officers, and ensure that school resource officers have the proper certification. And for youth police programs, these are programs where youth and officers are brought into non-incidental contact. Those are opportunities to really increase positive experiences between youths and officers. So in keeping with a model standard or model memorandum of understanding that we have for school resource officers, the draft standard recommends having similar memorandums for these types of programs and for having operating procedures to guide participating officers with their involvement in the programs. And just finally, and very briefly, the last three elements involve complaints, data, and training. And to increase in transparency and accountability in policing, the draft standard suggests that agency develop complaint procedures so that youth and their caregivers may follow up on, raise concerns about, and file complaints about officers, school resource officers, agencies, and related policy memoranda, operating procedures, and responses. And to build on that transparency and accountability generated through complaint procedures, the draft standard also recommends that data and trends are taken into account. So agencies are charged with identifying trends in officer and school resource officer and agency involvement with youths and students over time, and compile that into annual summaries of reports and complaints about youths that are maintained on the agency's website and available on agency and school premises. And lastly, the final element addressed is training, and the draft standard provides that agencies are to ensure that training is given to officers in accordance with all applicable juvenile training requirements. I know that was a very brief overview. The further draft standard and the cover memo are all provided in the materials. And I'll close by noting that members of law enforcement and the public are encouraged to submit comments and suggestions to postsecomments@mass.gov.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attorney Shatford, for that presentation. I just have one comment. I'm wondering whether there's been any effort to speak with the juvenile court about some of the issues that you address here. And if not, it seems to me, particularly given some of the initiatives under the new Chief Justice Gershengorn, it may make some sense to reach out to the court and to see what, if anything, that may add to some of the points that you're making.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can contact them and take that under advisement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from my fellow commissioners? I don't think I see anything else. Thank you again. And we will, I think, delay the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion of the proposed policy on information in the National Decertification Index, to the next meeting in the interest of time. And I think with that, I will move on to the voluntary relinquishment of certification with regard to Robert Choquette. And I turn to Randy Ravitz, please.
Thank you. As the chair indicated, we have an application by one Robert V. Choquette the second to voluntarily relinquish his certification as a law enforcement officer pursuant to the relinquishment policy that the commission adopted in April. The applicant served as a member of the Massachusetts State Police from 1993 to 2025. While his certification is set to expire on July 1st, he has indicated that it would be advantageous for him to relinquish it now, even if it's just a few days in advance. The commission staff conducted the due diligence called for by the policy and found no reason not to support his request. And so the executive director has asked me to convey his recommendation that the commission grant the application without attaching any terms or conditions additional to those stated in the relinquishment policy. And so we're asking the commission to vote to accept that recommendation unless there are any questions that the chair would like me to answer.
I don't think I see any hands in the air with regard to any questions. So I think with that, I will simply canvass the commissioners in terms of a vote in approval of what you recommend, you and the executive director recommend. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Crispin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Keserosian,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
and I'm also affirmative. That's unanimously carried. Moving on, there are no matters which are not anticipated by the chair at the time of posting. And I will now entertain a motion to move into executive session in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, an employee, or an individual under the same statute, Section 21A5, to discuss the investigation of charges of criminal misconduct under the same statute, but Section 21A7, combined with General Laws, Chapter 6C, Section 8C2, and to the extent they may be applicable, General Laws, Chapter 6, Sections 168 and 178, to discuss the initiation of preliminary inquiries and initial staff review related to the same and regarding certain criminal offender record information, and under Chapter 38, Section 21A7, combined with Chapter 38, Sections 22F and G, to discuss and to approve the minutes of a prior executive session. We will be addressing reports of preliminary inquiry in 9 cases. We will be addressing a request to enter into voluntary decertification or suspension in 1 case. We will be discussing the standards request for approval to conduct preliminary inquiries in 8 cases, and we will be getting an update on 1 preliminary inquiry matter. And with that, I will take a vote on moving into executive session. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Crispin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Keserosian,
Yes.
Mr. Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner Talley.
Yes.
I'm also affirmative. Randy, before we stop, do you want to just remind the public how they might communicate any questions to us? Or Enrique, either one of you, please.
Yeah, they can always just submit an email to posty-comments@mass.gov or contact us via all the information that's in our website. There's phone, emails, and general mailboxes.
Thank you. And let me thank all the members of the staff who have contributed to the information that has been provided to the public today. Let me thank the members of the public for your attendance at this meeting. Commissioners, we will take a 5-minute recess before we move into executive session. Jamie, have you posted the new information for connecting?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We will not be, members of the public, we will not be resuming the public meeting after the executive session. Thank you again.